this lesson, we're going to focus on grid. So we're going to place our elements of the website accordingly to the layout. Finally, we have some columns and some sections, so it would be much easier for our eyes to look at it. So this is how our website looks like currently. What we need to do is we need to put those elements into columns. So if you compare it with our layout, we'll see that some elements are close to each other, some are separated. So for doing it, we're going to use Grid from Bootstrap. What is Bootstrap? So Bootstrap is an open source toolkit. It's a front-end component library. So it's a very big and powerful tool. However, we're going to only use a piece of it, which is Grid. So we're not going to code the grid by ourselves. We're going to use a library and we can adjust it to our needs. So building the layouts would be much more easier. If you're curious about grid system, you can open the documentation, which is available at gatsbootstrap.com, and you can read about all the theory that stands behind grid and Bootstrap. But I will tell you the most important things you need to know to make it work. So let's get back to our HTML document, and let's focus on HTML for a while. If I open the whole folder, I will see that I have Bootstrap Grid CSS. And you can see some code out there. All that it's written here is CSS. But I don't want you to analyze it, memorize it, or learn. We're just going to use the grid that is defined here. So if we want to use this style sheet, we also need to link it in our HTML document. We have our styles.css, we've got external fonts, but we also need Bootstrap. So I would like to link it before my styles. The question is why I'm doing it before, not as the last link tag. The answer is that Bootstrap Grid might have some styles that can cause a conflict, that can actually overwrite our styles. So to make our styles more important, we put it on the last place in terms of the style sheet we have. So I'm changing the name here. The file is called Bootstrap Grid. Okay, sorry, I'm getting back to my HTML. Okay, I'm saving it, and my Bootstrap Grid is applied. Let's see if I can see any changes. Well, actually, nothing has happened yet, but if I dig deeper into my HTML code and head section, I will see that Bootstrap Grid CSS is applied. So the question you might have is how we can use Bootstrap Grid. So in the documentation that they show us how 3 columns are created. We can see HTML code here with some attributes which are classes, CSS classes, and we're going to use them as well. So the very first tag is div. Did you remember div? This is the container. This is the tag that's very generic and we can use it for various purposes, mainly for layouting, for placing the elements, nesting, etc. So we've got div with a class container, and below there is a row. Row class means that all the elements, all the columns that are included will be displayed in one row, so one by one, just like here. So let's copy container and row, and let's put them into our document, HTML document. But before, we're going to check out our layout. So I'm opening portfolio layout just here. And if I enlarge it, you will see that here there is a container and I have a 2 columns. So container row classes would be applied for the header section. So I have the header, and in the header, I'm pasting these 2 lines that I copied from the documentation. So I'm having the container open, but I also need to close this div. It closes just before the header is closed. So I'm adding div. I'm doing tab here. So everything that is included is our children of this container. And I have row. I need row to display 2 columns near each other. So I also need to close the row just before one div. Also nesting the elements within each other. All right, so I can see that all these elements mentioned here are children of row. What's next mentioned in the documentation? We've got another class which is called col_sm. It means that this is one column, and the width of the columns would be generated automatically depending on how many columns do we have. So they will take as much space as they need to. Let me copy it as well. So if we compare it with the layout, we see that this is one column and this is the second one. So everything here, like heading, list, and the button would be in one div called col_sm. So everything here till this place will be children of this div. So I need to close it. And the next content would be another column. So again, we're pasting div, and figure would be the children of this div. So let's recap what actually happened. I will make it more suitable for this display. So we have the container. It starts here and closes here. So the whole header is in a container. What this class actually does, well, you'll see in a minute in the web browser. And under container, we've got a row, and row helps us to display those elements near each other. So we have one column and the second one. So we can use comments, left column. This is the left column, and underneath we've got right column. So now it's much more easier to follow. This is the right column and this is the left column. So always pay attention to the closing tags, because sometimes it's very easy to get messy in your code. So if you click on the tag, you will see the blue underline. You can easily see whether the given tag is actually closed. So here when I'm clicking on div, I see that this is the opening tag, and in 37 line, it's being closed. And the same with the right column. I have opening div tag and closing in the 45th line. Okay, let's save it. Let's see what's generated on the website. I will close the DevTools and see that actually I have 2 columns. If I run inspect, you will see that they're getting stretched to the full side, so full width, so there are no longer 2 separate columns. But if I change the position of the DevTools to make the resolution, the width of the window browser bigger, I will see that they fit and that they are displayed one by one close to each other. So I can see that this is my left column and here my right column. One thing we can adjust at this level of the layout is to change the width, the size actually of the image we put, to make it smaller, to actually fill the full width of the columns. So let's get back to style CSS. And we can write that every image we have displayed on the website would take maximum width of the container. So maximum of the image would be 100% of its parent. It means that if call SM class has a specific width applied, for instance 600 pixels, the image, although its natural size, its original size, it's 700 pixels, it won't exceed 600 pixels because we're limiting its width by this line of code. So let's write it here. And here I'm showing you how we can make comments in CSS. I can just write a text. So this is limiting the width of the image. So it takes 100 width of the parent maximum, and I'm highlighting all the text, and again comment slash, so everything written here is a comment. So it's a bit different because in HTML we've got this characters, and in CSS we've got slash and asterisk. All right, so let's save it and let's refresh our website. And suddenly you can see that the image is getting smaller and it takes the whole width of the column. So we have the two columns near each other. So the header, let's say it's ready in terms of the grid. We've got the column 1, left one, and right one, and everything is in one row, and with the container. So what the container does, it limits our width, and it depends on the screen resolution. So for bigger screens, the container would be bigger. For smaller, would be smaller. So this is the responsive web design, and we're not going to get into details in this course, but I'll be mentioning some things that you can use while using Bootstrap. Okay, so the header is ready. Let's switch to different parts of the layout. If you see on the layout here, we have the full row of the list, so we can skip it for now because it's just the full width and we don't have any columns and we don't share this section between two elements, so it's okay for now. And we're in the projects now, so we see that we have two columns again. So we need to do the same. We need to apply the container row and class called column call SM. So we're in the project 1, we have the whole section. We apply the container, we have the row. So I have the left column here. I'll have the right column, so I'm writing right column. I'll make more space for easier to read. So I have the right column and apply call SM class. So I have the div. So I have, let's do the intersection. So I did the indentation, my code looks cleaner, and let's see. So this is the beginning of the right column, it closes here. This is the beginning of the left column, closes here. Almost there. We need to close row. You can see that it's not underlined by the blue line, so it gives us the information, Atom gives us the information, that this tag, this div is not closed. So let's close it under the right column. Okay, now it's correct, and you also need to close the container div. So right here, I'll do the indentation. All right, once more, and our code looks good now. So we've got left, right column. Let's save it and see. So I'm back in the browser, refreshing the page, and see that the image is in the left column and all the text are in the right. So it slowly reminds us of the layout that we're aiming at. Okay, so let's put more content of the projects into columns. We do it exactly the same. So I'll reuse these lines of code and paste it here. I'm closing the div for the left column. All right. I need to add the next column. So the image with the caption. So this is going to be, if you can see, this is going to be our right column. All right. So closing the tab, the div, indentation, and of course we need to double close div. So for row and container. And if we see, container is closed, row is closed, and we've got 2 columns. So what you need to remember about this classes from Grid Bootstrap is that row is only to use to keep columns, so we don't use it anywhere else. If we just want to display columns near each other, we'll use row, and this is the only situation. Container helps us to keep some certain width of the page. Okay, saving. I switch to the browser, and I see that the second project is within 2 columns. All right, so we have the last one, the last project. And again, we can reuse the code we have. This is project 3. So on the left side column, we've got the image. All right. And of course, we need the right side column. Right column, comment, pasting it. And of course, we need to close the right column. The left is already closed. We can do the indentation, and of course, closing container. Row, sorry, now we have to close the row because it's the child of a container. So we're closing row, and here we're closing the container. All right, let me quickly check if we're fine. Here we can only add that this is right column. All right, saving, refreshing, and I see that I have sections with columns, and it reminds us slowly of the layout. If you want to check how 3 columns would look like, you can do the test. So in the very last project, I can copy the right column and simply duplicate it. And what I expect from Bootstrap is to display 3 columns near each other. And I have 3 columns, so it's very easy later on to multiply. And these 3 columns are the same size, the same width. They're divided. If you would like to change the proportions, for instance, have the photo bigger, let's see in the documentation of Bootstrap. We're scrolling to the part where we have different width. So for instance here, one column is wider and the other are narrow. So here we apply a certain proportion. So we've got, imagine that we have 12 small columns and we just merge them in order to make the column bigger. So if I would like to have my column to actually take the half of the available space, I'm writing 6 because 6 to 12 is the half. So if I would like to apply this on my image here in the third project, so for the photo, I write here col6, and the other would automatically take available space, what's left. So they will divide the half of the whole container to those two columns. I'm refreshing the website and see that my image is 2 times bigger than its fellows columns. For footer, we're okay for now with that because footer doesn't use 2 columns. It's just like a 1 column a piece of layout, 1 column element of layout. So we're almost ready with aligning the elements. There are some tweaks that needs to be needed, but for now let's stop with Bootstrap Grid. If you're eager to find out more about Bootstrap Grid, I strongly recommend you to check out the documentation. There are many examples how you can create different widths of the column, how you can stack them to horizontal mode, and finally how to work on the responsive side of the grid.